Działki are little pieces of land. That's literally what the name means. And they are a standard part of the urban geography in Poland and an interesting kind of artifact left over from the communist era. These small plots of land are more than just small gardens scattered across every city in Poland. They are part of the fabric of society, and they have a major influence on what Polish cities look like. Millions of people in Poland are quite serious about these gardens and treat them as an extension of their homes, even though they're not legally theirs. And these gardens seriously distort the local real estate market for everybody. And I'll explain why in this episode of Polsko po angielsku. Okay, so welcome back to Polsko po angielsku, the internet's #1 source of information about Poland. Probably. Now, first, let me clarify our terms here. I'm saying działki, which you can see there on the screen. Działki, which is the plural form of działka, so one działka, two działki, and so on. Now, it literally means little piece of land, or little pieces of land. And a działka in Polish, działka can mean any piece of land, really. Like a piece of land that's going to be developed for a shopping center, a piece of land that's going to be where you're going to build a house or something like that. But in context, działki are understood to mean these little pieces of land, usually a couple of hundred square meters, used as a private garden. So in this video, I'm going to say działka or działki. Sometimes I'll just say gardens, but I'm talking about the same thing, these small pieces of land used for recreational purposes. Hey guys, a quick reminder that we are building the internet's #1 source of information about Poland. So please hit that subscribe button. Thanks for that, and thanks for watching. It's important to understand that these gardens are located in a different place from where the owner of the garden lives. This is not something that's in their backyard or even in the same part of the city where they live. The owner might live nearby, they might not, but the działki are always concentrated in these really big pieces of land, these massive complexes, some containing hundreds of individual plots. And entering the area where the działki are, it can feel like entering like a secret village hidden right in the middle of a big city. But to understand why someone might have a home or an apartment in one part of the city and a garden in a completely different part of the city, we have to go back in time to the 1970s and the 1980s. So in the communist era, state-owned enterprises like factories, mines, and railroads, and hospitals, and so on, were given huge tracts of land by the government. These employers would then take that piece of land and divide it into small plots and give those plots to their employees for good service or just being part of the team. Now, most of the people who got these small plots lived in these tall apartment blocks that dominated communist urban planning. And so these działki provided an escape from these gray concrete jungles and gave these industrial workers a place to relax and enjoy the fresh air on a nice summer day. Działki also provided a practical benefit for a lot of families because the communist economy was famous for its empty store shelves and chronic food shortages. And for a lot of urban families, their działka was a place to grow some potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, apples, berries, or whatever. Most owners of działki built what is called an altanka, like a small shed or a cottage, a place to have shelter, or in the summertime, a place to sleep. These days, a lot of them have been upgraded. They're really nice, actually, made of wood or sometimes brick. There's a legal limit on how large they can be. They can be up to 35 square meters, and you're not allowed to live there full time. Now, I've called the owners of these działki owners, but technically that's not the right word because działki have like a unique legal status that does not allow for anyone to own a działka in the usual sense of the word. As I said a minute ago, most of these działki were given out by state-owned enterprises during the communist era. And today, most of these enterprises no longer exist. In cases where the factory or whatever has been liquidated or disappeared years ago, formal ownership of the działki was transferred to the local city authority or in some cases the national government. So legally, formally, technically, the government at some level, sometimes local, sometimes national, is the owner, the legal owner of the property And the people who use it and have been using it for years are just, well, users. Basically, they're occupying the space. They are allowed to use the space, but they don't legally own it. So all the Działki in Poland are managed by an agency. The Polish acronym is PZD. I'll put it there on the screen, PZD. So when someone buys, I use my quotes here, when someone buys a Działka, they're not actually purchasing ownership, they're purchasing the right to use it. And that's why you can't legally live on them year round, because it's not yours. It's interesting because until not too long ago, Działki were seen as kind of like an uncool relic left over from a former time. You know, a place where your grandmother would go to pull weeds for the weekend or work on her tan. And as nice as some of them can be today, most Działki are kind of stuck in a time warp, and not in a good way. But all that changed with COVID. As with so many other things, COVID turned the world of Działki upside down. The pandemic sent demand and prices skyrocketing. Here in Krakow, where I live, you can easily pay 50, 70, maybe 80,000 zlotys or more for a small piece of land like this. Again, not to own it, but for the right to use it. So basically, COVID taught a lot of young urban professionals and families with children that having your own little private slice of grass in the city is actually a good thing, and often a good investment as well. And so many of today's younger owners, again, not really owners, users, but technically not owners, but you know what I mean. They are getting rid of the potato patches and the plants and the old flowers that have been there forever, and they're replacing them with manicured lawns and nice little wooden decks, maybe, or strings of lights and trampolines and nice barbecues and stuff like that. So for many people, Działki have been transformed from survival gardens, like they were years ago, to great spots for weekend parties and relaxation. Okay, so far so good, right? Działki are nice little pieces of land that people can use to relax during the summertime, little backyard, not necessarily attached to where they live, a place for the kids to play, a place to, again, enjoy a nice summer day. That's great, right? Yeah, of course it is. But something like Działki that take up so much land in so many places, there has to be another side to this. Działki were created and became popular in a world where land had no value, technically, during the communist era. But today, their number and their size create a massive conflict between communist era realities and the realities of a 21st century capitalist real estate market. And don't underestimate how many Działki there are, how much space they take up. Here are some examples from where I live in Krakow. Look at how many there are. Look at how big they are. Just about every neighborhood has one, and the city has grown up around them, influencing where roads and transport networks are built. So all those charming little gardens and summertime getaways create a huge problem for city planners and developers. Now, I don't expect you or anyone to have any sympathy for developers. Nobody cries over their problems, but you have to remember that their problems become your problems. So let's set the stage here. When these Działki were first created 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago in some cases, they were usually located on the undeveloped edges of the city, and the land was really not useful for any other purpose. However, over the last 30 years, Polish cities have expanded rapidly. So areas that used to be the edge of town are now close to the center of town, close to modern office buildings and luxury apartments and key transit hubs. To a real estate developer looking at 30, 40, 50 hectares of well-situated land being used for these little wooden sheds and tomato patches is incredibly frustrating, because the land is vastly underutilized in an economic sense. Remember that I said that this land belongs to the city or the central government, but developers just can't simply buy it. The land is administered by the PZD that I mentioned earlier, and they are an incredibly powerful organization, almost like a state within a state. If a city or a developer wants to claim that land or buy that land for redevelopment, they have to go through an extremely difficult and lengthy legal process. So first, there is a replacement rule. If a city wants to claim land currently occupied by Działki, if they want to claim that land to build a road or a school or something like that, or if a developer wants to buy the land to build apartments, they have to provide PZD that I mentioned earlier with a replacement plot of land of equal size and quality. Next is the infrastructure cost. If a city or a developer takes over this new piece of land, they are responsible for paying for the water lines, the electrical access, the access roads, and things like that. And lastly, there is something called granular compensation. The city or the developer, whoever takes over the land, has to appraise the value of each individual plot, each individual działka, compensate the owner, again, not the owner, but the owner, for not only what they're losing, but what's on the property, what's on that piece of land. If they have one of these old wooden altanka, for every little apple tree they have, for every bush or flower that they planted, they have to be paid for that. So by the time a developer or the city calculates the cost of the replacement land, the new infrastructure they have to provide, and this individual compensation, the project, whatever the project might be, usually becomes financially impossible. Again, I don't expect you to cry because developers have this problem. I know nobody cares about developers, but this is like saying that you don't care about the people who grow the food that you eat, or the people who build the cars that you want to buy, or the people who provide anything you need to live. Because as long as people want new homes, there will be developers, right? And the price they charge you when you buy your apartment or whatever is strongly influenced by how much it costs them to operate. And right now in Poland, the price of the land where they build things is roughly 30% of the cost of a given development. And the higher that cost is, the more they pass along to you. Land is expensive in Polish cities, and it's more expensive than it should be because of, yes, Działki. The existence of these huge, untouchable gardens takes a lot of land off the market, leaving less land available for purchase. And if you remember anything from page 1 of your economics book, the less there is of something, the more it costs. So the supply of available land for development in Polish cities is artificially restricted because of Działki. This drives up the cost of land that is available, and that's one of the main drivers behind the crazy prices of apartments that we see in Warsaw, Krakow, Wrocław, etc., etc. When you buy an apartment in a big city in Poland, you're paying more for it, and it's in a worse location than it otherwise would be because Działki distort the market for land in Polish cities. Now, I'm not taking the developer's side here. I'm just saying that this is a very complex issue. Actually, if anything, I'm frustrated by the fact that here in Krakow, again, where I live, every piece of land is eventually turned into another goddamned apartment block. If it's possible to build on a piece of land, they will. Eventually, they will, believe me. There's no piece of land that's too stupid. There's no location too stupid to build more apartments. And that's why so many sections of the city, and not just Krakow, other Polish cities as well, turn into this ugly concrete jungle. Sorry, but it's true. I just don't understand how a country with a stable, actually falling population just continually builds block after block after block. I don't get it. But that's just me. Maybe I'm especially stupid. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Defenders of Działki say, this is mine. This was given to my father, to my grandmother years ago when they were barely paid anything for their work. This has been in my family for, 40, 50, 60 years or whatever. So fuck off. The other side says, okay, yeah, it was given to you by a government that no longer exists. Also, it was given to you by a government that collectivized everything. There was no private property. You were not given this land. You were given the right to use it. And now that is over. So fuck off. And back and forth it goes, probably forever. Both sides telling each other to fuck off. Anyway, that's my look at Działki in Poland and what it's like to, look at both sides of the issue. It's a nice place to relax on a nice summer day, grow your own tomatoes, or is it an expensive luxury that makes us all pay more money for our apartments? I don't know. It's complicated. Let me know what you think in the comments. While you're here, check out one of these other videos from Polsko po Angielsku. Please like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.